Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Beth Conover. I'm the Executive Director of the Salazar Center for North American Conservation at Colorado State University, which is quite a mouthful. I'm here today with Katie Bamer and Benita Duran, and we are here to share basic information about the Thriving Cities Challenge. Next slide. Katie. Okay.
Is it go? There we go. Sorry about that.
Okay. No. Technical difficulty. Okay, perfect. Brief bit of housekeeping here at the beginning. We will go through this agenda in about half an hour. It may take a little less or a little more, and then we will have a Q&A period. In the meantime, you are encouraged to write your questions in the question box in the GoToWebinar control panel. We will address as many questions as we can and try to get to them at least thematically. But if your question hasn't been answered, please visit the frequently asked questions, the fact sheet, both posted on the website for the prize, and feel free to contact us. We'll share that information in a moment. Everyone will be muted until the Q&A period, except for us. I think that's it on housekeeping. Okay, who is the Salazar Center? The Salazar Center was created in 2016 by, actually, yeah, no, this is good, that's fine. Katie, go back one slide for a sec. Just a quick overview of the agenda. We'll talk about who is the Salazar Center, why we're doing the Thriving Cities Challenge, what the challenge looks like in terms of eligibility, timeline, application, etc., how it was designed, basically, and what you can expect from it. Some applicant resources and information, and then we will demonstrate the actual proposal platform. Okay, next slide. Thanks. Who is the Salazar Center? As I was saying, created in 2016, became operational in the fall of 2018, so we're just over 2 and almost a half years old. We are based, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold, at Colorado State University in Fort Collins, but with a strong presence in Denver, where the new CSU Spur campus is under development. And our interest is really at the scale of North America, landscape scale conservation and urban scale conservation. The center was founded by former Secretary of Interior, U.S. Senator, and Colorado Attorney General Ken Salazar, who we are fortunate to have actively involved in our program as an advisor. He founded the center together with Tony Frank, who is the chancellor at CSU, former President Frank, and they co-chair our current advisory board. We are not an academic center per se. We are more external facing and impact oriented. And we're really interested in how to translate research into policy and practice, and how to convene folks who share interests but might not otherwise share strategies or ideas. And we do that in a number of ways. We hold an annual symposium, we do webinars, we have this annual incentive challenge, first and foremost for today's purposes, in addition to a whole slate of other programming, and you can learn more about that on our website. We'll share that information as well. What else? I think that's most of what we had on the Salazar Center. Can we go to the next slide? We are eager to connect with you. We do a regular e-news that is really, if I may say so, and because I don't create it, but it's a usually very graphically fun and brief document, and it's a good way to stay in touch with what we're working on. So you can sign up for that on our website. We hope you'll also follow us on social media. We will be doing updates and news about the challenge as it evolves on social media. So Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn handles are all here. We also have a YouTube channel And you can reach us by email at csusalazarcenter@gmail.com. Next slide. Okay, so why the Thriving Cities Challenge? The idea of doing what was originally called an incentive prize came out of the fact that we're very small. We have a lot of we like to think we punch above our weight a little bit. We are a flexible, nimble entity with a relatively small staff, but a pretty powerful network of professionals, philanthropists, professors, and others who have a common interest in the health and resilience of both natural communities and human communities throughout the continent. One of the ways that we can build on the Secretary Salazar's reputation and fulfill our mission, which is to share best practices across the continent, is by engaging folks through these challenges. And what we do is ask for the best ideas emerging around a specific topic. Because we focus at the scale of both landscape scale conservation across political borders and in cities, we do that. We try to alternate the challenges from year to year. Our first challenge was last year, the Connectivity Challenge, and you can find out more about that on our website. And this year, we've launched our first urban challenge, the Thriving Cities Challenge. This came out of understanding and acknowledgement that in the face of climate change, cities are often feeling the greatest impacts in terms of heat, urban heat islands, flooding, air quality, water quality, at least in terms of human communities. And within cities, low income and communities of color are often those most at risk for those health impacts, economic impacts, and vulnerability more generally. There has, in the past several years, been a number of kind of converging movements emerging to explore the overlap between racial equity, climate resilience, and green space in cities. And we thought that for our inaugural urban challenge, that we'd like to encourage new thinking, share new thinking about innovative approaches going on nationwide. The way we've designed this challenge is in an effort to benefit everyone who applies, and Benita will talk more about that in a moment. In other words, it's less about who wins and more about building a community of interest and a cohort of sort of a learning community that can emerge from this. Next slide. So as I said, proposed ideas that we are hoping to collect and share. We have no proprietary interest in this. It's mostly about sharing best practices and learnings across the board, but we're looking for projects that are at the intersection of racial equity, climate resilience, and nature-based solutions. Nature-based solutions, we have a whole set of resources explaining what that means, but it's basically green infrastructure, whether it's urban tree canopy, river corridors that handle floods, but also accommodate trails, new ways of handling air and water quality in cities by looking upstream into the broader region. Whole set of ideas are emerging around working with nature rather than trying to conquer nature to solve some of these problems. Next slide. And now I will hand off to Benita Duran, who is managing much of the Thriving Cities Challenge process, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. Thanks.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here today. We appreciate your interest in this effort. So we know that anytime you're you set out to develop or submit a proposal, that it's time consuming and takes energy. But we have, I believe, an application process that's really straightforward and very directed at getting at your creative ideas and the approaches. And you're going to hear about that from Katie, but let me just talk a little bit about how the structure of this program will work. It really is, as Beth was talking about in her description, it's a fresh, equity-focused opportunity, and it's a challenge. It's a challenge for all of us, but it's an opportunity to engage in a very different way. It's an opportunity to engage with this center, and what's being offered here is an opportunity to really build community and build capacity and build stronger communities of interest. But to participate in this effort, you need to apply. And in the first round of the application process, the evaluators of the proposals will be coming from all walks of life throughout Canada, Mexico, the United States, Virgin Islands, and Puerto Rico. That's our eligibility pool, right? So our evaluators are coming from these places as well to help provide us with, and to provide you with feedback and a chance to network and engage a little more to shape and strengthen the work that you're doing. Out of the pool of applicants, those that are selected will be in what we're calling a finalist round, and that's sort of that middle section of the graphic. But it is focused on capacity building and coaching for the organizations and the teams that are part of this. There will be appropriate levels of support that we can align with the needs of the organization. It's tailored to the organization's needs and their program plans. And then it's this finalist cohort group that will then be invited to a pitch event, which will occur in September of this year. And we'll have more details on that. But there are really multiple ways and reasons for you to consider applying. And it's important that you know that there's just not one winner. As Beth said, it is not a winner-take-all approach. So we have a number of funders aligned with supporting this effort. And along with the VF Foundation, there are other investors in this process as well, but they have no role in the evaluation or the selection of the finalist pool. Let me go on and talk a little bit about your team and how that can take shape. The other way. So your team should be unique to your place, right? To your place where you're working, and reflect the interests of the community. Again, the city is a community. It can be a village, a district, a special area, and an area of focus for your challenge application. Your idea and your concept, your solution, takes shape in partnering with others. So we want you to think strategically and to think big. So it could be natural partners that you've been aligned with and you have relationships with, or it could be new partnerships. And you'll have several opportunities in the application itself to speak to these different partnerships and the rationale of your teaming. The leading team, though, does need to be a nonprofit organization, and they have to have that fiscal accountability of the program. And it's required for our funding through our connection with the university, Colorado State University. So your project team could have more than one nonprofit organization involved. It could have a couple, but it could be the nonprofit organizations with a governmental entity or a community development organization. But what's important for our equity agenda and what we've laid out is this equity focus is that the organization needs to have the leadership, needs to be led by, on the staff or on the board leadership, a person or persons of Black, Indigenous, or people of color. So the project needs to be designed to occur in a city or a town, a district, a community in the United States, in Canada, in Mexico, Puerto Rico, or the Virgin Islands. And we'd see this as an opportunity for engagement that has that meaningful connection to nature-based solutions that we're striving to find, nurture, and support. So the timeline for this project is one that we'll go into a little more detail in the evaluation. And that's the next slide. We're going to go, so again, one organization, there we go, representative needs to be from a nonprofit organization. So, and the BIPOC connection is really important to this, and the organizations are in the North America continent, including Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands. And then the next slide about timeline relates to the application due date is April 15th. And in our evaluation period that I highlighted with the evaluators, that occurs from April 15th through May. By early June, the finalists that are in the pool, which will be, we've budgeted for 5 to 8 finalists, and it may be with the additional funding support, we can grow that to a few more finalists in our pool. That is our goal. But all applicants will be provided with a status update and feedback related to their application by early June. And then June through September is the capacity building cohort engagement with the finalists. And the pitch event is set for September 28th or 30th, virtual or potentially a hybrid virtual and in-person. And then our next part of this program is to talk more about the specifics of the application itself. Yep, Beth?
Sorry, it's 28th or 29th, Benita.
What did
You
I
said
say?
30th.
Okay.
That's fine. I want to make sure everybody.
Sorry, I'm looking right at 28th and 29th. And so we want to go through a little bit of the application and that process itself so you could see that it is a very straightforward approach, and Katie will be handling that in our next few slides.
Thanks, Benita. So before we jump into scoring and application and the demo of the application platform, we just wanted to point out something that we've created for all interested applicants on our website that we encourage you all to check out. So there are two pieces that I'll point out here, and please don't feel like you need to jot all of this down. We'll share these slides, and all this stuff is very easy to find on the website through that menu bar at the top. But on the How to Participate page, we've written up and answered our most frequently answered questions about this process. So for example, how do you define a city? What is a nature-based solution? Is my team eligible? So we encourage you to look at those. And again, if your questions are not answered in that section, please submit your questions in the question box here today. We will answer all the questions we get. If we're not able to get to them live, we will still answer them and share all of those with you today, who are here today, in our follow-up materials. So in addition to the FAQ, another piece of the website that we encourage you to check out are applicant resources. That's its own tab on the main menu of the website. And there are 2 pieces there that we think might be helpful to everyone. The first is examples of other projects, policies, initiatives that are taking place across North America of cities working on climate change and resilience, figuring out how to put equity at the forefront of their work, deploying nature-based solutions. So we've sourced those examples from the news, from our own network, and we'll continue to add to that list as we hear of new stories. So keep an eye on that page. And if you have questions about if your project kind of checks these boxes of resilience, equity, and nature-based solutions, that's a great place to look just to see what other folks are doing. The other thing you'll find on that applicant resources page is other resources that we've pooled that are not our own that we think might be helpful. So webinars, city parks alliances, funding hub. So if you're kind of just working in this space in general, and as well as thinking about a proposal for the Thriving Cities Challenge, we recommend checking that out just because there's some good resources there. And as with the examples, we'll continue to add to that list as new stuff pops up on our radar. And as has been mentioned a few times, if you can't find what you're looking for in any of these sections, please don't hesitate to reach out to us by shooting an email to that Gmail address that's on the screen. So obviously, as you're developing your proposal, you'll want to know how we're scoring these projects that we hear about from everybody. So one place where you can check that out is, again, on the website, on the scoring process page. As Benita mentioned, each team's proposal will be reviewed by a minimum of 5 evaluators. Those evaluators will be using a rubric with 5 criteria to do their scoring. Those criteria are community-led and place-based, equity-centered, feasible, innovative, and impactful. Each proposal will be scored on a scale from 1 to 5 against each of those 5 criteria. And if you visit the website, each one of those is broken down in a lot more detail, so you can see what a score of 2 on the criteria feasible looks like and all that good stuff. As part of the feedback process, we'll not only share those scores from each of your judges, so you'll see how you fared against those 5 criteria, we'll also share the qualitative comments and feedback that the judges provide through the scoring process. But just another resource that we encourage you to take a look at as you're developing your proposal. And we're getting ready to jump into a demonstration of the application platform, but there are a few things I want to point out before we do that. For the first time, we're offering teams the opportunity to submit their application in Spanish. I'll show you where to click on the website to access that translated version of the application, but if you choose to do that, we will accept your answers in Spanish and then have them translated back into English for our evaluators before they score. And if you have any questions about how to use that part of the application, please don't hesitate to reach out. Another piece that we have added to this process new for this year is the ability for the primary applicant to add co-applicants. So we encourage these projects to be coming from teams with members from a bunch of different organizations. So if it helps you to have a number of people in the platform working on the application collaboratively, we've created that opportunity, but it is not mandatory. If it's easier for one person to just go in and fill out the whole application, you can do that as well. But as we walk through the demo, I'll show you how you can add those co-applicants and how that works. Another piece that I'd like to point out is that we do ask for a video submission as part of the proposal. This is intended to be the spot where you add some visual interest, where you capture your energy and your passion. We do not expect this to be a professionally produced video. You can shoot it on a smartphone, and we provide tips for how to do that best. You can see that in the application itself. You can turn a PowerPoint presentation into a video. We also provide instructions on how to do that. And we provide general tips on what kind of content we'd like to see in that short video. But please don't feel the need to spend money on it, recruit a filmmaker. It's much more about just adding another layer to your story. It does not need to be a fancy production. And all that we request for that piece of things is either a YouTube or a Vimeo link. And again, in the application, there are some instructions on how to upload a video and generate that link for us. One other thing that I want to point out is that we allow for teams to upload and provide letters of support or recommendation, but they are optional. Again, because we're asking proposals to come from teams with lots of different members, you may well have everybody whose buy-in and whose perspective is needed represented in your team. And if that's the case, you might not need letters of support or recommendation. You might already have everybody in your group and be able to speak to that. If not, if there are community stakeholders, city groups, anyone whose buy-in, whose perspective is going to be important to your project being successful and they aren't part of your team, that's where you might consider adding a letter of support or recommendation. But again, they are not required. There are 2 ways to add those letters to your application, and I'll show you how to do that when we jump into the demo. And one last thing before we get started, just so everybody is aware, if you go to the Apply tab from the main menu of our website, you can see the application in its entirety before you get started. So if you want to see what kinds of questions we're asking and what the application entails before you create a profile and jump in, you're able to do that. You're able to print that page if you need, and in our follow-up materials, we'll include a PDF of the application because we've heard from folks that that is helpful to have that piece of material. But with all of that, I think we are ready to do a demonstration. So I'm going to switch over from our slides to the website. Now we're going to show you what it looks like to actually work on your application. As you can see, I'm on the Apply page of our website. This is the page where you can view all the questions on the application before you get started. So everything that you'll have to fill out on the application form is listed here. You can also print this page, and we encourage you to review it before you get started. There are a few links up top that you can click on to get started on the application as well, but I'm going to scroll to the button at the bottom of this page. Now we're on the actual application screen. You'll see the same instructional text at the top of this page, encouraging you to check out guidelines and the rubric, explaining that you own all the data that you submit as part of your proposal, reminding you of the deadline, all that good information. If you're interested in applying in Spanish, click here, and a Spanish translation of the application will open in a new tab. For our purposes today, though, let's proceed in English. If you've already created a profile and started your application, this is where you'll sign in to continue working on it. But if you haven't started yet, you'll need to create an account. So I'm going to click Sign Up, and I'm going to enter my email. And create a password. It let me know that my passwords match, and I'll click Sign Up. On this page, it will prompt you to start a profile, which is the first piece of your application. So let's click Create a Profile to get started. And the first thing you'll be prompted to do is answer 3 questions about eligibility before you can move forward. So I'll click yes, 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 and then I can start my application. All right, before I move forward, I just want to point out some of these questions are marked with a red asterisk and other are not. The ones with the asterisk are required, the others are optional. If you don't have a social media handle, you can leave this box blank. I'll continue to fill out my profile. And autofill is helping me out here. Now, I mentioned earlier that you're able to add co-applicants to your application. If there are members of your team that you would like to help you fill out this form, we want to allow you to do that. So here, I'm going to click Yes, Add a Team Member. Now, you might just want to tell us who else is on your team, or you may want to give them access to your application. If you want to give them access to your application, you'll click Yes here. If you don't, you just want us to know that they're on your team, click No. I want this particular person to help me, so I'm going to click Yes. I'll enter their name. Email. And phone number. Now, if you've checked this box that you'd like them to collaborate, this platform will automatically send an email to the one that you've provided, letting the person know that you've added them to the application and that you can start working on it and they can start working on it with you. You can continue here and add as many team members as you like, selecting whether or not you allow them to collaborate on the application with you. For the sake of time, I'm just going to add 1, and I'm going to say no one else is represented. You have the option to add up to 3 co-applicants. If you use up all those fields and still have other team members that you want us to know about, you can select 1, 2, or 3 from this dropdown, and it'll pop up more fields for you to fill out about that team member or partner organization. But let's return it to 0. I will select what kind of people are represented on my team. If I didn't select other, I'll write NA. And then there are a few questions about your team. I'm just going to quickly enter some text to move on here. You do not have to finalize your profile your first pass through. You're allowed to save it as a draft. But so we can move on to the application, I'm going to create my profile. It shows me my profile is complete, and I can now click here to get started on the application. When you get to this screen, you'll see 2 things. As I mentioned earlier, we have 2 options for you to submit your letters of recommendation. One of them is here, but I'll get into that a little bit later. If your application is not completed, if all the fields aren't filled out, it will say here when you log back in, action required. Let's click open. And here you can see the application in its entirety and start filling out questions. Again, questions marked with a red asterisk are required. So I'm going to scroll through this. As I mentioned earlier, we do require that video presentation, and here's where you can find some of those guidelines and tips for filming, but please remember this does not need to be a professional production, and we'll accept YouTube or Vimeo links. As you can see, these are all just text box responses. They have a word count limit, and you will see help text below explaining what we want to see in each answer. One of the only upload fields on this application is the budget. We ask you to provide your budget as either an Excel file or a PDF. And there's also a narrative component to this piece. Now we're at letters of support. This is one of the 2 ways that you can have your references captured. So if you've already gone ahead and gotten your letters from your supporters or your references, you can upload those files here. When your proposal is finished, you can click Ready to Submit, and that'll allow you to move forward. But let's save it as a draft. And we'll hit Close. Now this is the other place where you can request a letter of recommendation. If you'd prefer that this platform send your reference an email to submit their recommendation, you can do that here. You'll click New Request. You'll add their name, their email, and write them a note, and then you can click Send. I'm not trying to add a recommender right now, so I'm going to delete this. Close this screen and return to our dashboard where we've got all of our options. Here you'll see the Submit button. It won't let me click on it because I haven't completed the application. Once you've finished this piece and it no longer says action required, you'll be allowed to submit. It's important to note that only the primary applicant can hit Submit. Those co-applicants that you may have added can work on every other part of your application, but they can't click that final button. So we think this platform is pretty straightforward, but if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out.
It's also worth noting that if you have trouble logging in for any reason, you can reach out to us and we can provide technical assistance.
Yes. All right, so we've already got a number of good questions. The first one, and we got this in our first webinar as well, is it one single location that is eligible, or can it be a network of cities' locations across an eligible landscape?
You want me to answer?
Sure.
Okay, sorry. I think a network of cities and locations is fine. It is a place-based concept by design. And so if it is truly a network, I think you'd have to make the case still for meaningful community investment in the project and meaningful leadership from the communities you're working in. That would affect your scoring on the rubric. The rubric's been designed to reward place-based local leadership with strong BIPOC representation.
Anything you want to add to that, Benita, or should I move on to the next one? Okay. All right. Let's see. While we are focusing on a city problem, do we need to have the city itself as one of our partners? I think the answer to that, technically no. It's entirely up to you to build your team with the members and the organizations that you think will make you successful. If the city that you're working in, if its offices are not part of that team, it will not affect your eligibility. But we would probably like to see, you know, why you've chosen not to include them, or how they will support or sort of bless your project if they aren't involved. Beth or Benita, anything to add to that?
I would just say the city doesn't have to be a formal partner, but one of the scoring rubrics, again, is based on your ability to implement. And so it's partly a question of how important will support from your local government be to realizing your vision and making the case for that. Benita, you want to add anything? Okay.
Okay, next question. Are all team members funded, or are some working with you unfunded? So we are able to distribute funds through our home at the university to one team, and that team has to be a registered nonprofit organization. So once we distribute that funding, it is up to you whether you share it with your partners, use it to support your own staff, use it to support infrastructure. We don't place a ton of restrictions on that, but we can only disperse funds to a single entity. So that's the nuance there. Beth, anything to add to that?
No, I think it's up to your team to decide how to spend the capacity building finalist grant, if that's what we're talking about. And then if it is beyond that if you're the award winner, then again, it will be based on what your team proposed in the budget you laid out, at least in broad strokes. And so the intent with providing capacity building funds was to support work and people's time where it might otherwise not be supported. And that, you know, I think that was the central consideration. Benita?
Well, I was just going to add, because I don't know that I made this point earlier, but in that period of time, in the summer months that we have identified the finalist group, I just wanted to reiterate what Beth just said, that there will be maybe 5 to 8 finalists or in this round, and they would be receiving a grant of up to $10,000 that would be supporting their capacity building efforts, that hopefully would lead them to a strong pitch in that September 28th, 29th timeframe. So.
Great. Maria let us know that she was able to jump in and create a profile. Maria, thank you for letting us know. I suspect I've just done this so many times on my computer that it might not like my email address anymore. So thank you for letting us know that. I really appreciate it. Next question, how does the level of experience weigh in the scoring system?
I just encourage folks to look at the rubric. I think that's a complicated question. There is some of the rubric will reward teams that have some experience that will lend to their success, their ability to implement their vision. But that's balanced against, again, innovation and engagement in community. And so if you have strong ideas and relationships and you want to try something new, I'm not sure that makes you less strong than a team that's stacked with folks with deep green infrastructure experience but doesn't have that community engagement. Does that answer the question? What do you guys think?
I would just emphasize that it is about building community, right? And we don't know what we're going to get in the application process. So it's a new, challenge for us on our end as well to be open to the possibilities. And I think that's what we want to be conveying here, that we're open to that creative opportunity that you have in mind, that your organization has been pondering and sort of working on for a while.
All right. All right, next question. Just to clarify, as long as the main applicant is a nonprofit, organizations that aren't nonprofits can have a central role in the project, correct? Yes, the answer to that is yes. Again, we need that nonprofit entity to be able to distribute funds to, should you be a finalist or the winner of the challenge. But again, whoever you want to include on your team, that's up to you. And those other organizations that might be represented do not need to be nonprofit groups. Let's see. I understand this initiative as supporting planning a project, not actually putting it on the ground. Is this correct?
Not quite. The goal here is innovative thinking that can lead to impact. And so part of what will be scored on is potential for impact. The funding isn't sufficient for capital expenditures. It's not sufficient for major new initiatives, but it is intended to catalyze efforts that might otherwise not get off the ground. And so it's not just planning. I think if you emerge from this with a plan and no odds of implementation, we wouldn't consider that as strongly as something that is either poised for implementation and can be piloted through this program or can be brought to realization and at some new level meaningfully through these funds. So it's not really intended to be a planning grant. The $10,000 in the summer for the finalists is intended to help build your proposal. We will provide optional mentors. We will provide workshopping opportunities to discuss your proposal and make it stronger. But the ultimate award will be given for something where we think there is a reasonable chance of actual impact, even if it's at a smaller scale with potential to grow. You guys want to add anything?
I was just going to suggest, Beth, talk about what that the award is for through the competition in September.
You mean the $50,000?
Yep.
At this point, we have a $50,000 prize award for one group that emerges from the Pitchfest we'll do in late September. This is very much along the lines of the incentive challenge model, but we like to say it's less Shark Tank and more Dolphin Tank. It's intended to be a friendly competition. Last year, teams supported each other, they cheered for each other, they got in touch with each other afterward and shared ideas and supported each other's progress. And that is really exactly what we hope will happen here. So there will be a pitch fest, as described earlier, in September at our symposium, where teams will describe their final proposals to a panel of 3 evaluators. Will be different, distinct than the ones who worked on the initial round. You can watch the video from last year for an example from that if you like. That's on our YouTube channel and linked through our website. But the award will be made to the team that's determined to meet the criteria for the innovation concept most completely. And then that team will have 2 years to realize the goals of their project, during which we'll stay in touch. We'll ask the team to come back in a year at our next symposium to talk about what they've learned and their progress. But it won't be required to be completed for 2 years after that. Does that cover what you had in mind, Benita?
Thanks.
Great. So we've had a number of questions just asking to kind of clarify who gets funded when and what finalist support looks like. And so to clarify that, so we will receive proposals from everyone who applies. And after that evaluation period, we will select those 5 to 8 finalists. And those are the teams who will receive both the $10,000 capacity building grant, as well as some training and capacity building that I'll let Beth and Benita talk a little bit more about. But there is no funding prior to the announcement and determination of those finalists. So those finalists will receive that interim funding, participate in that pitch event in September, and one team will emerge from that process to receive the final grant. So beyond the non-financial resources that we've provided that we hope will help you develop your proposal and think about the intersection of racial equity, climate resilience, and nature-based solutions, there's no monetary support just as part of applying. But Benita and Beth, can you talk a little bit more about what we envision in terms of the finalist cohort and what they'll be doing with us?
Well, I think I would say that takes shape as this evolves, right? And we know we've talked about a cohort of 5 to 8 organizations, and Beth and the team have been very focused on working with funders for additional resources for that. So that pool could grow to be a little larger. And so that cohort group would be engaged together during that summer period in sessions, in conversations with an assigned mentor to be helping them move to preparing for that final pitch event. What more to say to that, Beth?
I would just say that the whole idea of offering workshopping and capacity building in the summer was intended to be responsive to the needs and interests of the finalist groups. The challenge we have is planning for that ahead of time and then carrying it out in a fairly short time frame. So we will have probably a structure in place and an idea in place and a conversation with finalists once they're selected to fine tune that. That'd be my best guess. In other words, it's not as though we have some great curriculum all lined up that we know everybody, needs to hear. We want it to be useful. So.
And I'll just add quickly, there is a question in the application itself that says, what else do you need besides money to realize your vision? So if there's a particular resource or training that you'd love to have as a finalist, that would be a great place to tell us about that, because we'll definitely be looking to teams' answers to that question to help us think about what that piece of the finalist cohort support looks like. I believe we've talked about how this is a 2-year funding period. Could projects go beyond that 2-year time frame? Beth, I'll let you answer that one.
Yeah, to clarify, they could have started 5 years ago, they could go for another 10 years. The intent is that the award is focused on this 2-year time frame in some fashion, where at the end of it, you'll be able to report back on some metrics of success. What's worked, what hasn't, what might you change as a result of what you've learned. We will hope for a report back to that effect, but it can certainly be a longer term project, and this is a distinct phase of it or something that this award could make possible in some new way. Benita, you want to add to that?
Good.
All right. Is this a cash grant or is it paid out on a reimbursable basis? So again, we've only done this one time in the past, and we gave them 50% of their award almost immediately following that pitch event, once we went through some legal and logistical hurdles with the university. I think we can probably be flexible with what folks need. Beth, I'll let you.
Yeah, it's not reimbursable though. It would be a cash award, and either all up front or in 2 phases, but likely all up front. I think that's what we're looking at right now.
We've got a question about eligibility and kind of the intersection of the nonprofit group and the BIPOC representation. That does not need to be the same entity. So if the primary applicant with that nonprofit status does not necessarily check that box of BIPOC leadership, we will be looking for it in other members and organizations represented in your team, but not one organization does not need to check all of the boxes for your eligibility. The eligibility is based on who comprises your team. Obviously, the more diverse leadership within the project team we see, the better, but it's not going to affect your eligibility if that primary applicant does not check both of those boxes themselves, but we'll need to see it in other partners.
And I would just add to that it's meaningful engagement that we're looking for. I mean, that is most important in this effort, and it takes time to build relationships, and maybe your organization has those, but if not, I think that becomes, you know, something that you're presenting as a recognized challenge to face. But it's genuine, meaningful engagement that is going to make your application stronger when it comes to partnering.
I'm glad you said that. I couldn't agree more. That's an important part of that piece. In other words, we really want to avoid token representation in any way. Yeah.
Someone asked, can we use a fiscal sponsor? The answer is yes, again, as long as that fiscal sponsor has a nonprofit status. And if that's, yeah, so if your fiscal sponsor is who you'd like us to remit those funds to you, should you be a finalist and or a winner, that is appropriate, but we just need to, you need to be able to demonstrate that they have that nonprofit status. Okay, do you support projects that are already in progress, or are you looking for projects that are just getting started?
I think we addressed that a little earlier. It can certainly be projects that are already in progress, but understand that we have up to, you know, we think we'll have a strong response. If we have dozens of proposals and similarly dozens of evaluators, it's likely that the criteria that we've outlined in the rubric will be especially important to meet. And so having an innovative, kind of clear, catalytic concept that can really make a difference in a community is really important. So you may have the world's greatest ongoing project, but just having the world's greatest ongoing project won't necessarily get you finalist status in this challenge, because it might need to be the world's greatest ongoing project with an idea of how to scale it. Maybe it's scaling it in your region, maybe it's scaling it nationally. That could be one way to build on an ongoing project. So just to say, there probably should be something new, some twist on it that would allow it to grow or expand. This isn't so much of a traditional foundation grant in that sense.
Anything to add, Benita? Okay. Someone asked, can you submit more than one video? The field where we ask for that YouTube or Vimeo link is not formatted in such a way that it'll prevent you from moving forward if you put in more than one URL. That being said, we do want to be conscious of our evaluators' time. Beth, what do you think about that one?
Can I just say, can you emphasize what's the time frame of a video?
We've asked that people keep it to about 1 minute. Of course, we're not going to close out the video and not continue watching if it's 65, 70 seconds. And we've outlined that in the body of the application, what we expect to see in that video.
I'd say we'd prefer one video. And if you can combine two together, great, but we'd probably prefer one. And we know, and believe us, we had to do this last year on the fly as the world shut down due to the pandemic, how challenging that can be to do remotely. So just know that we appreciate that and we sympathize and understand. That's why we're emphasizing it does not have to be, really high production quality. Points for creativity are great, but it's more about just sharing some aspect of your project or helping us see the faces behind your project that we otherwise might not see, sharing what the visual interest to whatever you're working on. But Anita, do you want to add anything?
Thanks.
Okay.
Is it possible that the additional funding sources, so I'm guessing that question refers to the VF Foundation and our other partners who have supported this challenge, may they also invite a proposal themselves? So what we do to support this entire group of applicants, not just finalists, is once we've received all of the applications, we assemble them into what we call a prize booklet that highlights every single complete eligible proposal that we receive. There are a number of funders in our network who are interested in this kind of work, and they are the first people that we share that booklet with and encourage them to consider supporting the projects contained within.
I would say at least a couple of projects last year got funded that way, at least to some degree, that funders in other regions saw projects in the booklet that they were interested in and wanted to learn more about. So we've heard that anecdotally, and that was exactly why we did it. So we plan to do that again this year. We share and encourage funders to explore the full set of proposals in the booklet. And that's one of the sort of value add pieces that we've tried to include for proposal applicants.
Mm-hmm. So I would just emphasize that that's another good reason to apply, right? And to be in this pool of applicants, because you're getting the feedback in the evaluation project and the process and the networking that may come from the visibility of your proposal submission.
Next question, will the lead applicant have to be the person to do the pitch, or could anyone in the application group do so?
I think we asked that be a team effort. So this whole thing is about building a team, working as a team, producing the outcome with your partners. And so it's up to you entirely how you model the pitch. We might have advice, but at the end of the day, it's your pitch. So up to you.
Yeah. And I'll just say that last year between the 5 finalist teams, there was quite the mix. Based on availability, there was one team whose pitch was done by a single person. And then some people had 2 or 3. And then I think one of our groups even had 4 or 5, and they kind of tag teamed it. So yeah, I think, we want to see that team represented, but whatever works best for you. I do think it would be a bummer if the lead applicant wasn't present for the pitch, and then, if you were to win and they weren't there, that that might not be so fun for them. But that's, if you move on to that phase, it's definitely something that we can talk about with you.
Well, I'd put an underline on that. If you're applying, we hope you'll make yourselves available for the Pitchfest. If you, advance in the process, that's part of the deal. So.
When does the grant year start for the winner?
Roughly, I guess I'd say November. It'll probably take us that long to get it processed and an agreement worked out. I think it's worth emphasizing this will only be the second time we've done this. And so we can tailor the needs to some degree to the applicant. It's not a one size fits all kind of deal. Last year, Borderlands Restoration Network won the connectivity challenge, and we had to work out some things that were unique to their team for their award. And we're, I think, in a good position to do that, depending on what comes in.
Next question, are matching funds required? Straightforward answer is no. Obviously, we'd love to see if you've garnered support from other funders, and vice versa. If you're able to leverage this opportunity to get more support for your project, that's great, but we do not require a match for you to be eligible.
I'd also say in-kind support of various types is also counts, but the main point is that we'd like to know, right, that you can either imagine leveraging this award or you can use it to leverage other funds in some way, ideally, or other resources. But I think we're not trying to reward more highly resourced organizations. We recognize that some groups might come in with very few resources, and so we don't have a bias for groups with a lot more money. It's more about the quality of the team and the idea.
Great. I think we've probably got time for one more question, because the one that I have queued up, I think will require a little bit of talking through. Can you talk a little bit more about the 5 evaluation criteria, specifically equity-centered, innovative, and impactful? And just real quickly before I let you two jump into that answer, similarly to that, someone has asked a question about the innovative criteria. Does that mean innovative in our own community, or that it's innovative in any location?
That's a good question. The goal here is to build ideas and innovations for a broader community. And so I think if you can make the case that the innovation in your community has broader interest in application, that's great. If it's just about, well, you know, we have this one stormwater outfall that we want to turn into a stormwater swale, probably not as, even though that might be innovative for your community, that probably doesn't have as much broader interest, but I think it all depends on context. If you're planning to do it in a new way or to engage people in a new way, that might be interesting. If you're planning to use data in some new way or track your success in a way that allows us to see or allows you to see rather the community engagement and impact, that might be something different. Benita, do you want to add anything?
Just to say that, you know, we're open to the possibilities, right? And that's what I think is important to emphasize, that we're you know, because this is the first time this type of challenge grant has been organized around thriving in communities. I think it creates an opportunity to think about these things differently, to present them in a way that shows the creativity that's aligned with it, that you know, addresses some of the goals that we have in the application. I think those things are always, that's important, but to know that it isn't a rigid, structured sort of definition of what we're looking for.
Awesome. Well, with that, we have hit our 1 hour mark. As I mentioned, if we did not get to your question, we will still answer it. I will compile all the questions that we've received today and provide both the answers that we've talked through during this webinar, as well as answer all of the questions that we didn't get to, and you will get those in a follow-up email later this week. That email will contain a link to the slides we've shared today, the answers to all of those questions. We'll share a PDF version of the application and a full recording of today with that demonstration of the application platform added back in. And if you come away from today and that follow-up email and still have questions, again, please don't hesitate to reach out. But thank you all so much for your time today.
One last thing, Katie, maybe what we should do is do a running list of questions from last session and this one, or just combine them into one document. That way everyone gets benefit of the same set. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Yep.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. We really look forward to working with you. We hope we'll have an opportunity to meet you in person, and have a great day.
Thanks.
Okay.